There's a habit that costs less than $3 a week. Not a supplement, not a gadget. Something you've walked past 1,000 times in the grocery store. Backed by real published research. The kind most expensive bottles on the shelf can't claim for themselves. This content is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Please consult your doctor before making changes to your diet or routine, especially if you take medication or have a health condition. If you're over 60, you've probably had this thought: my bones aren't what they used to be. Maybe a doctor mentioned bone density during a checkup. Maybe a friend broke a hip after a small fall that shouldn't have broken anything. That fear isn't irrational. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, nearly 20% of women 50 years of age and older live with osteoporosis of the hip, neck, or lower spine. 1 in 5 women you know. Here's what almost nobody tells you. The supplement industry knows this fear well. Walk into any pharmacy and you'll find dozens of bone health formulas costing $40, $50, even $80 a bottle, promising stronger bones and fewer fractures. Some have real ingredients behind them. But very few can point to a study as consistent and inexpensive as the one we're about to walk through. Researchers at Pennsylvania State University spent years studying something almost embarrassingly ordinary: dried plums, prunes, the same wrinkled fruit your grandmother probably kept in a jar in the kitchen. Not as medicine, just as a snack. In one trial, 235 postmenopausal women were split into 3 groups over 12 months. One group ate no prunes. Another ate 50 grams a day, about 5 or 6 prunes. The last group ate 100 grams a day. Using detailed bone imaging, researchers tracked bone density and strength at the hip and shin bone over that year. The women who ate no prunes lost bone strength, as expected with age. The women who ate prunes at either dose largely held on to what they had. That's a finding published in the peer-reviewed journal Osteoporosis International, led by Professor Mary Jane D'Souza at Penn State. This isn't just about women. A separate study looked at men 55 to 80 years old with existing bone loss. Over 3 months, men eating 50 to 100 grams of prunes daily showed measurable changes in blood markers tied to bone turnover, the process of breaking down old bone and building new bone. So why does something this simple barely get mentioned? There's no patent on a prune. Nobody can charge you $80 for something you can buy in bulk for the price of a coffee. But there's a reason this habit works, and a detail about how much that most people get wrong. If you want more of this, hit subscribe now. And if this made you think of someone, share it with them. Let's get into what the science actually says. Before we go further into the science, there's a piece of history here that most people, even lifelong prune eaters, have never heard, and it connects directly to a place a lot of you know by a very different name today. In the winter of 1856, a French immigrant named Louis Pellier, who had come to California during the gold rush looking for fortune in the goldfields and found none, shifted to something steadier. He'd started a small nursery near San Jose, and he sent his brother Pierre back to France with one job: bring back cuttings of the French plum, the variety grown around the town of Agen, known for producing exceptional dried fruit. Those cuttings survived a months-long sea voyage, packed in potatoes and sawdust, arrived in San Francisco that December, and were grafted onto wild California plum trees. Within a few decades, the valley around San Jose was covered in prune orchards, so many that the region became known as the Valley of Heart's Delight. That same valley is the one we now call Silicon Valley. Long before it was computer chips, it was prune orchards, stretching for miles, feeding a national industry. That's not a random trivia fact. It's a reminder that this isn't a trendy new superfood invented by a marketing team last year. It's a food that's been part of American tables for over a century and a half, studied seriously in modern labs precisely because it's stuck around that long. Let's get into what the science actually says, including the parts that don't fit as neatly into a dramatic headline. We already walked through two well-known Penn State trials, one in postmenopausal women, one in older men, both showing improved bone measures with 50 to 100 grams of prunes a day. But intellectual honesty matters more than a clean story, so here's the fuller picture. A systematic review and meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrients pooled data from 11 separate randomized controlled trials covering 747 participants total. The honest conclusion from that pooled analysis: the effect on bone mineral density in postmenopausal women was borderline, strongest at the lower spine, but the review's authors were clear that individual trials varied in size, duration, and dose, and that while laboratory and mechanistic research strongly supports a biological reason prunes could help bone health, well-controlled human trials remain limited, and the evidence, while promising, isn't yet definitive enough to call this settled science. We're telling you that not to undercut the habit, but because a health channel that only shows you the flattering data isn't one you should trust either. What you can walk away with honestly is this: multiple peer-reviewed human trials point in a consistently positive direction. The biological mechanism is well explained, the cost and risk of trying it are both very low, and the uncertainty that remains is about how large the effect is, not about whether the food is safe or whether the underlying studies are real. That honesty actually leads somewhere useful, because it points to something else worth knowing. This $3 habit works best as one piece of a bigger picture, not a standalone fix. And the second piece of that picture doesn't cost anything at all. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention runs a program called STEADY, which stands for Stopping Elderly Accidents, Deaths, and Injuries. It exists because the research on exercise and fall prevention is, frankly, some of the strongest evidence in this entire field, stronger in some ways than the nutrition research we just covered. A recent systematic review looking at 27 randomized controlled trials in adults 60 and older found that structured balance and strength programs consistently reduced fall incidence. Tai Chi programs were associated with reductions in falls of roughly 31 to 58%. The Otago exercise program, a specific set of leg strength and balance exercises originally developed in New Zealand, showed reductions of 23 to 40%. General multimodal strength and balance training showed 20 to 45% reductions. For community-dwelling older adults broadly, challenging lower body strength and balance training done 3 times a week has been linked to roughly a 1/3 reduction in fall risk. Notice what's missing from that list: cost. These aren't expensive gym memberships or equipment purchases. Tai Chi classes are often offered free or low cost through community centers and senior programs. The Otago program is designed to be done largely at home. This is the same theme running through this whole video. Some of the most well-supported health habits for people over 60 aren't the ones with the biggest price tag or the flashiest branding. They're often the plainest, least marketed options, sitting quietly next to the expensive ones. If you're building your own low-cost mobility routine, the research suggests pairing something like a daily prune habit, approved by your doctor, with a few sessions a week of balance and strength-focused movement, is a more complete approach than either one alone. Bone density is only half of the fall equation. The other half is whether your muscles and balance systems can catch you before a stumble becomes a fall in the first place. There's one more number worth knowing. because it puts the fiber content of prunes in a bigger context. The USDA's dietary guidelines for Americans recommend that women 51 and older get about 21 grams of fiber a day, and men 51 and older get around 28 to 30 grams. According to Harvard Health, the average American adult eats only 10 to 15 grams a day, less than half of what's recommended for older adults. That gap isn't unique to prunes or bone health. It shows up linked to higher cholesterol, blood sugar swings, and constipation, all things that matter more as we age. A serving of 5 to 6 prunes provides a meaningful chunk of that daily target on its own, which is one more reason this particular food earns its place in the conversation, separate from the bone research entirely. While we're being upfront about nuance, it's worth mentioning a genuine, ongoing scientific debate because it strengthens the case for food over pills rather than weakens it. For years, some researchers raised concern, based on a large reanalysis of the Women's Health Initiative trial and pooled data from several other studies, that calcium supplements, particularly without vitamin D, might modestly raise the risk of heart attack and stroke in some people. Other more recent reviews, including one backed by supplement industry funding, found no such link and argued the original concern was based on flawed statistical methods. As of now, this remains genuinely unsettled among researchers, and major medical bodies differ on how seriously to weigh it. What most of them do agree on is this: getting calcium and related nutrients from food rather than concentrated supplement pills carries little to none of that theoretical risk, simply because food doesn't deliver the same isolated high-dose spike a supplement pill can. That's one more quiet argument for a habit like this one over a bottle from the pharmacy shelf, not because the pill is necessarily dangerous, but because the food has less controversy attached to it in the first place. There's one more nutrient worth naming because it connects to mobility just as directly as bone density does, maybe more directly day to day. Prunes are a solid source of potassium. A serving of 4 to 5 prunes provides roughly 280 milligrams of potassium, around 12% of the general daily recommendation. Potassium is the mineral responsible for proper muscle contraction, nerve signaling, and helping regulate blood pressure. Low potassium intake, which is common in older adults who eat fewer fresh fruits and vegetables than they used to, has been linked to muscle weakness and cramping. The kind of thing that quietly makes stairs harder and walk shorter long before anyone calls it a mobility problem. So, on top of everything said about bones, this same habit is also feeding a mineral tied directly to whether your muscles are working the way they should be. The mechanism isn't mysterious once you break it down. Prunes are rich in a group of natural compounds called polyphenols. In plants, these compounds protect against insects and disease. In one earlier trial, 106 women between 55 and 75 years old were split into 3 groups. No prunes, 50 grams a day, or 100 grams a day. After 12 months, blood tests showed that both prune groups had significantly lower levels of certain inflammatory markers linked to bone health, including a substance called TNF-alpha and several interleukin markers. Interestingly, one common inflammation marker, C-reactive protein, didn't change. Science rarely hands you a clean, perfect story. It hands you data, and the data here pointed in a consistent direction. Prunes also happen to be one of the better plant sources of vitamin K, a nutrient your body needs to properly use calcium in bone tissue. Low vitamin K levels have been linked in research to lower bone density. So you have fiber, polyphenols, and vitamin K, all working together in one inexpensive fruit. Now here's the detail almost every article online leaves out. The amount matters. The studies that found real results use somewhere between 50 and 100 grams a day. That's roughly 5 to 6 prunes on the lower end, or 10 to 12 on the higher end. Eating 1 or 2 prunes occasionally, the way most people do, was never what was tested. This is not a garnish. It's a daily habit, and consistency is what the research actually measured. It's worth noting this isn't only an American finding. The European Food Safety Authority reviewed the evidence in 2012 and reached a similar conclusion from a different angle. Consuming at least 100 grams of prunes a day effectively supports normal bowel function in the general population. 2 continents worth of food safety regulators looking at the research independently landed on roughly the same daily amount. That brings us to the part nobody warns you about before you go buy a bag. Prunes are high in natural fiber and a sugar alcohol called sorbitol. If your body isn't used to that much fiber, jumping straight to 10 or 12 prunes a day can cause bloating or digestive discomfort. This is not dangerous for most healthy adults, but it is uncomfortable. And it's the main reason people quit after 3 days and call the whole thing a failure. The smarter approach, the one that mirrors how most people actually stick with a habit, is to start small. 2 or 3 prunes a day for the first week. Then slowly work up toward the 5 or 6 gram range used in the studies over 2 or 3 weeks, letting your digestive system adjust. If you're on blood-thinning medication, or if you have diabetes or a digestive condition, this is exactly the kind of decision to bring to your doctor first, since fiber intake and blood sugar responses can interact with certain treatments. Here's something else worth knowing. In the 12-month Penn State trial, every single participant, including the group that ate no prunes, was also given a baseline amount of calcium and vitamin D, 1,200 milligrams of calcium and 800 international units of vitamin D daily. The prunes weren't tested as a replacement for basic nutrition. They were tested as an addition on top of it. That distinction matters because it tells you prunes are a piece of the puzzle, not the whole picture. This is where a lot of health content, on this platform and elsewhere, starts to exaggerate. You'll see thumbnails claiming a single food reverses osteoporosis, restores bone like magic, or replaces medication entirely. None of that is what the research shows, and we're not going to tell you that here either. What the research shows is more modest and, honestly, more believable. A consistent daily habit that may help protect the bone density you already have, and may support healthy bone turnover as you age. That's not a cure. That's a supportive habit, and there's a real difference between the two. Let's talk about why this particular detail rarely makes it into mainstream health coverage. Dietary supplements in the United States are regulated very differently from medications. The Food and Drug Administration does not require supplement companies to prove a product works before it goes on the shelf. A bottle can carry a bone health claim without ever having been tested in a trial like the ones we just walked through. That's not illegal, it's simply how the category is regulated. But it does mean the price tag on a supplement tells you nothing about the evidence behind it. Compare that to what we just covered. Multiple independent trials, published in peer-reviewed journals, tracking real bone density changes over months using medical imaging, not customer reviews or testimonials. And the cost of the intervention being tested was a bag of dried plums from the produce aisle. To be fair with the numbers, not every supplement user is spending $80 a bottle. A study published in the journal BMC Geriatrics, tracking real supplement spending among older adults over 5 years, found the average monthly cost burden for supplement users landed somewhere between about $15 and $16 a month, adding up to roughly $186 a year for the average user. That's actually in a similar range to a consistent $5 to $6 a week prune habit. The real difference isn't always the price tag, it's what's actually been tested behind that price tag. And for a lot of individual bone-specific formulas on the shelf, that number is much thinner than people assume. Picture something like this. A woman in her late 60s recently told by her doctor that her bone density scan came back a little lower than last year's. She's not in crisis, but she's worried, and she wants to do something proactive alongside whatever her doctor recommends. Instead of ordering an expensive bottle from an ad she saw online, she starts adding a small handful of prunes to her breakfast, gradually building up over a few weeks, and mentions it at her next appointment so her doctor can factor it into her care plan. That's a realistic, low-risk way this kind of information gets used in real life, not a promise of a specific outcome, just an example of the kind of small, informed decision this video is about. There's also a mobility angle here that connects directly back to why bone density matters in daily life. Weaker bones don't just show up on a scan. They show up as a fear of falling, a hesitation to walk on uneven ground, a reluctance to take the stairs without holding the rail. Fractures, particularly hip fractures, are one of the leading reasons older adults lose independence. Protecting bone strength isn't an abstract lab result. It's connected to whether you can keep moving through your life the way you want to. So where does that leave you? Not with a miracle, with a small, findable, inexpensive habit that has more research behind it than most of what gets marketed to people your age with scarier language and higher price tags. The one warning worth repeating, because it matters more than anything else in this video. This is general information based on published research, not a personalized recommendation for you. Your medications, your kidney function, your existing conditions, all of that changes the picture, and only your doctor has that full picture. If there's one thing to take from all of this, it's that meaningful health decisions don't always come with a dramatic price tag or a flashy label. Sometimes they come in a bag, sitting quietly in the dried fruit section, costing less than a cup of coffee, backed by more actual science than most people realize. Consistency in a small daily habit tends to matter more than intensity in a single expensive purchase. Let's put a real number on that mobility connection because it's bigger than most people expect. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 14 million adults, 65 and older, roughly 1 in 4, report falling each year in the United States. Nearly 319,000 older adults are hospitalized every year for hip fractures alone, and the CDC reports that 83% of hip fracture deaths and 88% of hip fracture emergency visits and hospitalizations are caused by falls. Bone strength and fall risk are two sides of the same coin. A fall that a 30-year-old walks away from can be life-altering for someone with weakened bones. This is exactly why a habit that supports bone density isn't a vanity project. It's connected to something much more practical: staying independent, staying out of the hospital, staying able to do the things you actually want to do: gardening, playing with grandchildren, traveling, simply walking to the mailbox without fear. Now let's address a question a lot of people watching this are probably already thinking. What about sugar? Dried fruit has a reputation for being sugary, and if you're managing diabetes or watching your blood sugar, that concern is completely fair. Prunes do contain natural sugars, mostly fructose and glucose, and portion matters. This is precisely the kind of detail where a blanket YouTube recommendation isn't enough, and where your doctor or a registered dietitian can help you figure out where prunes fit into your specific meal plan, if at all. Nobody watching this should take 5 or 6 prunes a day as a universal prescription without accounting for their own health conditions. Here's a practical question people often ask after hearing about the research. How do you actually work this into a normal week without it feeling like a chore? Based on how the study participants were guided and general dietary guidance around fiber-rich foods, a few simple approaches tend to work. Chopped prunes stirred into oatmeal at breakfast. A few prunes eaten alongside a handful of nuts as an afternoon snack, pairing the fiber with some protein and fat to slow digestion. Stewed prunes with a bit of cinnamon as a simple dessert instead of something processed. None of these require special equipment, a new grocery budget, or a trip to a specialty store. A standard bag from almost any grocery store, at roughly $3 to $4, can realistically last most of a week at the studied amounts. There's a broader pattern worth naming here because it shows up again and again in nutrition research. Studies on whole foods, fruits, vegetables, basic dietary patterns tend to receive a fraction of the research funding that new pharmaceutical compounds receive. That's not a conspiracy, it's simply a matter of what's patentable and profitable to fund long-term. A drug company can recoup $1 billion research investment by selling an exclusive medication for years. Nobody owns the rights to a prune. So when solid research does exist on a plain, ordinary food, like the trials we've walked through today, it rarely gets the same marketing budget as a supplement aisle product, even when the evidence is arguably stronger. That imbalance is worth sitting with for a second. It's not that supplements are automatically bad. Some absolutely have their place, and your doctor may recommend specific ones based on your blood work. It's that price and marketing spend are not proxies for evidence. The loudest claim on a shelf is not always the best supported one. Learning to ask, where's the actual study before, how much does it cost, is in itself a habit worth building, separate from any single food. So here is precisely where this small, repeatable choice leaves you, practically. If you are curious about this, the actual next step isn't buying a giant bag of prunes today and eating a dozen tomorrow morning. It is smaller than that. Mention it at your next doctor's visit. Ask whether it makes sense for your specific health picture, your medications, your blood sugar, your kidney function. If your doctor gives the go-ahead, start with 2 or 3 prunes a day, let your body adjust for a week or two, and build from there toward the range the research actually studied, 5 to 6 on the lower end, 10 to 12 on the higher end, depending on what feels right for you and what your doctor supports. Real change, the kind that actually holds up over many long years, rarely looks dramatic while it is happening. It looks like a small, boring, and repeatable choice made consistently long after the novelty wears off. That is not as exciting as a miracle cure headline, but it's a lot more honest, and honestly, it's a lot more likely to still be true 5 whole years from now. One last and final reminder for everyone before we close. Everything in this video is educational, based on published research we've referenced along the way, not a personalized medical recommendation. Please talk to your doctor before changing your diet, especially if you take medication, manage diabetes, or live with a kidney or digestive condition. What works in a research trial with careful monitoring isn't automatically the right fit for every individual situation, and that's exactly why that conversation with your doctor matters more than anything said in this video. If this video provided you with something truly helpful worth remembering today, please tell us in the comments what stood out most: the fall statistics, the fiber warning, or the fact that a $3 habit actually outperformed expensive bottles. Please like this video if it was useful to you today. Share it with a parent, a neighbor, or a friend who has been nervous about a recent fall or their bone density result. And if you want more educational videos just like this one, subscribe so you never miss our updates. Thank you for spending this valuable time with us today. Please take great care of yourself, and we will see you in the next video very soon.